of a sudden,
It's,
all right,
it's live.
we're
Yeah.
live. Yeah.
We were just chit-chatting. Hi, guys. Let's see. All right. So I need to double check and make sure. We were just talking about Mercury and retrograde and how technology doesn't work and all that fun stuff. Let's
So
see. It
let's
looks
just
like
hope
we're in there.
everything works for this session here.
Yeah. Let me go look on my phone too, just to make sure that we're live. If you're here and you can hear us and see us, feel free to drop comments. Let me know you're here. Where are you right now? Are you traveling? Let me know. Hi, Gabrielle. Yay. Gabrielle's here. She's going to be doing sound healing with you guys next week. I'm so excited about that.
That's super exciting. I
I
actually
know.
just did a sound bath on Saturday.
Nice.
Yeah.
I
And it
guess
was,
maybe it's a sound bath. I say sound healing, but there probably is a difference in the two, I would think.
there probably is, but it was fabulous. I'm a big fan of them.
She says, I can't wait. Yay, me either. So we have Vanessa Lawson here with us today. I love Vanessa, you guys. She's like the most organized person I've ever met. I've had her in my Bill Like a Boss membership a couple times to like teach to the Bill Like a Boss members about just getting your systems going in your insurance-based private practice. So she's done that with us. And I really love her presentations and the way she organizes things. So I'm excited to bring her to you guys today. She'll tell you more about herself, but just before we get into it, I just want to remind everybody, this is the free preview week of the Traveling Therapist membership. So everything we're doing this week is just like a little taste basically of what you'll get inside of the membership. So I'm super excited. Every single month we're going to have, at least 3 to 4 events like this that's going to give you tons of information to really work on that. I guess it's a pain point we all have. It's like, how do I balance my life as a traveling therapist and as a therapist? Like, how do I find that balance? And Vanessa's going to talk about the flow today too. But anyway, that's the whole point of the membership, to help you guys find time to be able to live that life that you want to live on the road, or even if you're traveling just occasionally, like some people do. So anyway, I'm excited about this. I'm going to take myself out of this and just give it to Vanessa. And I'm going to drop a PDF in here that she's created for you guys to take with you and work on this while we're talking about it, or later if you want to. Okay, so let me go out of the view. Okay, it's all you, Vanessa.
All right, awesome. Well, I'm so glad to be here today. Thank you so much, Kym, for having me. And also, just as a quick note, I am not able to see the comments. So if you have a question, feel free to drop that, and then Kym will just let me know. And so that I'm happy to answer any questions you have live. And then I can go back and pop into the comments later as well and answer them there. So just as a brief introduction, as Kym said, I'm Vanessa Lawson, and I am the founder and owner of Vanessa Operations Management. And I specifically partner with therapists who are in solo and small group private practices to help just create greater ease and efficiency in managing the day-to-day of a practice. So I'm also a certified director of operations. I love all things back end in the business. So like the things that nobody sees except you are where
I love nobody wants to deal with either.
Yeah, and the things that nobody wants to deal with. And so like I just want to support you in creating systems, processes, flows that actually work for you. And here's the beauty of it, is that like running a business can be hard. I mean, everyone knows the ups and downs of being a business owner and owning a practice, but everything doesn't have to be hard, and it doesn't have to be hard all the time. There are definitely steps that can be taken to create more efficiency and ease. And so especially for those of you who are traveling, sometimes it can be really hard to find a flow for getting those things done in your practice, because your schedule is changing, right? Like you're on the road, you're in different time zones, you are wanting to explore the places that you're going. So you don't often have the same kind of routine that somebody has who's in one location and kind of, their week kind of is the same week in and week out. which makes it even more important to find a flow that works for you, so that while you're doing all this traveling, a bunch of loose ends aren't getting dropped, for your practice. So that's what we're going to talk all about today, is how to, find your own flow. But here's the thing I want to just start with is I feel like a lot of times when we talk about efficiency and operations, like one of the words that often comes to mind is productivity. And so I don't know if you have like an immediate reaction to that word. I would love for you to put in the comments like what you think about productivity when you hear that. Kym, I see you nodding your head.
Oh my gosh. I'm productive, but it's a mess. I mean, I am a mess because I'm like slightly ADD and I have 1,000 ideas. So, I think I'm being productive, but really I spend a lot of time all over the place with like 1,000 tabs open in my computer and hopping from here to there. So yeah, when you say that, I'm like, I'm kind of productive. And yeah, Gabrielle says,
Yeah.
I hate the P word.
So I'm actually with you. So here's what I'm going to do today that I hope is a little bit liberating for you, is that I actually don't use the word productivity at all.
Nice.
Because here's the thing, we are not producers, we are people. And we do need to do things to keep, our businesses and our practices running, right? Like there are actions that need to be taken. But at the end of the day, the goal is not to produce something. The goal is to take those actions that are necessary for you to fulfill your vision and meet your goals, right? So like even looking at it in like our
I forgot to hit record. Sorry.
there we go.
Go ahead.
Even, just thinking about not necessarily work related, like if you were wanting to move toward a healthier lifestyle, the goal isn't to like check off your list of like, okay, I ate X number of calories today and I exercised 3 times this week. The purpose is to do the actions that are going to move you towards your goal. So like in your practice, when you're thinking about what those essential tasks are, when you're thinking about finding your flow, it's all about moving you towards your goal. So if there's actions that are not moving you towards your goal or that are not necessary for your vision, then you don't need to do them. So I find that just thinking about it that way is that like I'm a person who has a vision and who has goals, and these are simply the actions I need to take to move me towards them, like is much more liberating than thinking, oh, I need to produce something. And at the end of the day, to feel good about myself or to feel good about my work, I need to have checked off XYZ on my list. However, I will definitely say that I love a to-do list and I love checking things off of it. So, but yeah, I think just like that mindset around, what we're really trying to accomplish helps to energize us a little bit more about that work, even if it's not always the work that we love, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So here's in the work that I've done with therapists, and really anybody, I mean, this is for you as a therapist, but this really is true across the board, is that in order to really find a flow that works for you in managing the day-to-day of your practice, of your business, of your life, there's really this trifecta, right, that we need. So one is that we really need to know ourselves, like, how do we work best, and especially like when Kym mentioned like, oh, I've kind of got this ADHD brain, for those of us who maybe identify as being neurodivergent, like we can work well when we align with who we actually are and our strengths, right? So part of it is just like, okay, assessing what's my natural working style and how can I align better with that, because that's going to create more flow rather than always trying to work against who we naturally are. And then the second part of the trifecta is really choosing the tools that support us. Like there are a million different tools that you can use, and some people are going to rave about ClickUp. Some people will rave about Trello. Some people will rave about the EHR they use, but at the end of the day, the tools to use are the ones that actually make sense to your brain and work for you. And just because they work for someone else doesn't mean that they will work for you. And it's okay. Like, you don't have to get on the bandwagon of using the same tools that everyone else is using.
Absolutely.
And then
I've tried all the tools. I totally just agree with that. It's like, I've been to ClickUp and Asana and Trello and, there are ones that feel more intuitive to me. So I can totally
and
relate to
so
that. Yeah.
you go with what works for you. That's the whole idea, is that it's your workflow. So if it doesn't work for you, scrap it. Do the thing that works for you. And then that third part of the trifecta is actually identifying what are the things I actually need to be doing. Like, how many times have we sat down at our laptop to do some type of work for our practice, right? And then we find ourselves 10 minutes later, scrolling through Instagram.
Yeah.
And then it's an hour later, we're diving into TikTok videos. And then we're wait a second, what did I do? And a lot of times that can really be alleviated by, on the front end, knowing what we actually need to do and having a plan, so that when we sit down, we're okay, I need to do this, this, and this, because this is what will move me toward my next goal. This is what will move me closer to my vision. This is what will keep my practice sustainable. Right. And the other thing is that it takes the guesswork out of it. If we know that we have an hour, then we can sit down in that hour and we don't even have to think about it. We just pull up our task list, we pull up our tool and say, okay, I need to bill, I need to respond to these emails, and I need to complete some notes. Boom, done. And then once you're done, you're done. So that's really, in my mind, the trifecta of what you need in order to have a successful workflow for yourself. And the other thing I just want to caveat that with is that there are lots of people who have created systems that they will teach you on, here's how to have inbox zero. Here's how to, manage your day. Here's how to do this. But here's the thing. That system worked for them. And if that kind of system and structure works for you, then by all means, go for it. But it's also okay if it doesn't, because again, at the end of the day, you need a workflow and a system and a process that works for you and aligns with you, your vision, your life, and your practice. And sometimes those pre-made systems, as even though thousands of people may have benefited from them, it's okay to not be one of the 1,000.
Yeah, exactly.
So I'll just pause here for a second, Kym. If there's any questions that you saw come through, or any comments, or if you want to add anything to that, I would love to hear some feedback or questions.
Yeah, well, Gabrielle is asking if you help people that are coaches, people that are other than therapists. She used to be a therapist, now she's a coach, and she wants to know if you help with systems and as a online business manager, I guess, the OBM part.
Yeah, I certainly can work. I mean, I primarily work with therapists, but I certainly will work with anyone, especially, especially if someone's really trying to get things cleaned up, organized, and manageable. Yeah, I am happy to work with coaches as well. I've been in business for a number of years, and before I niched down into working primarily with therapists, I worked with a very broad range of business owners.
Nice. I like it. And then let's see. And then she said, I hate the P word. She said that earlier. And then Cheryl says, hi, Cheryl. And I was just asking if anybody can relate to what you're talking about, this mindset shift, that you don't have to do it the exact right way that everybody does it, or follow a certain protocol. And Cheryl said, absolutely true. And with no judgment, I think, just relating to what you were talking about. So that's the comments we have so far. And I just want to say, I was just going to say, Vanessa gave me the best tip one time. I implemented it and it helped me so much. You were in Bill Like a Boss, I think, and you said, create an archives email. folder in your thing, because I always get like, I always get these emails. I'm like, I want to come back to them. So I just leave them and then my inbox gets all cluttered. And I was like, that is genius. So now I have Kym's archived folder and I just pop them over there and I hardly ever even go back and look at them, but at least it gets it out of my way and I don't feel like I'm like deleting something. So that little tip right there really helped me, and
Oh,
I'll never forget that.
yeah, I'm so glad to hear that. And, and
Yeah.
it is, sometimes it's just those little things that it's like, we need to clear out the clutter, but a lot of times we're just really afraid to hit delete or get rid of something. And so it allows
Yes.
us to like keep it until we feel like we're ready to part with it, but it's not like showing up, every day, and
Yeah.
that's the other thing is some people do need inbox zero, like that for them to function. They
Mhm.
require that. But you know what? I've also worked with business owners who got 15,000 emails in their inbox and they
Yeah.
just don't, it doesn't even phase them, you know?
That's me.
So,
It phases
where,
me, but it's just too overwhelming, so I just leave them.
yeah, whereas like, I'm just like, oh, there's a notification. I can't leave that notification there. I've
Oh
got to
my
get
gosh.
this figured out. So
Oh,
again,
I
it's
hate
just, it's
that.
how we're all different, and the more that we can just
Yeah.
accept who we are and embrace it, the easier it is to really, find that flow state in our work.
Mhm.
Um, Go
So,
ahead.
I was just saying, Brandon just put a comment in here. I think Brandon might already be in the membership. I'm not sure, but he said it'd be cool to hear workflows that Vanessa has observed that were compelling or efficient. I find it helpful to glean from others the workflows that they're using and pull from what worked for them, basically, is what he's saying. So I don't know if you're going to get into that with your presentation.
Yeah, I can give a couple, as we get through it, I'll give a couple examples of what I've seen work well for people,
Okay.
in general, or what people seem to kind of hold on to. So yeah, I'll definitely get to that. If
Okay.
you want to click on that link that's in the comments for the PDF, I'm going to go ahead and share it up here. We're not going to go, can you see yeah, you can see that screen. So
Yep.
we're not going to
Mhm.
go through this like, sentence by sentence. But essentially, so one of the things that I do with clients is I actually work with clients one-on-one to help them create a workflow. And I have like a lengthier assessment process that I have them go through. And then we get on a call and we talk through some things. And then I design a workflow around everything that we've gathered.
Nice.
And so this workbook is sort of like for those who want to kind of DIY it, and just sort of see if you can figure it out. Like this gives you all of the essential components that we would cover, in that session. And then I also offer like for those who really feel like they need more support in like actually implementing it, like we'll go through the workflow creation and do 8 weeks of accountability to really get that
Mm,
flow refined for them. Because I've just found that some people really, really appreciate that accountability piece.
nice.
So this workbook, it's also fillable. So if you download it, and you click on the boxes, you can, type inside the boxes. So you don't have to print it, but if you like to print things and write by hand, that's obviously, you're welcome to do that. So when I'm working with people to find their own framework, we go through this 3-part process where, like I mentioned, we assess their natural working style, and then we take a look at what tools that work for them. And then we look at, at identifying what their essential tasks are. And then we talk about the different ways that they could structure their flow to be more cohesive for their life.
Nice.
And one thing that I will always say that's most important is that a lot of times, just like when we're like, if you're starting a new diet or if you're starting a new exercise plan, it's like we often have this idea that like we want to go all in at 100%. So we're like, I'm going to go to the gym 5 days a week. I'm going to do this. But we kind of set ourselves up for failure sometimes because it's often not sustainable. And our real life doesn't often support it. And so anytime, I'm working with someone to create something, I want to work with the real life that they have today, not the life that they want in a year. Because that's how it's going to work for you. You just have to be honest, like, because,
Mhm.
and also recognize that in different seasons of life, you have a different capacity, like I'm a mom. I have a 4-year-old and I'm pregnant. And
Mhm.
let me tell you, this pregnancy has like majorly shifted my capacity.
Oh my gosh.
And so like there are just things that I'm like, I do not have the energy to do that right now. So I've even had to look at my own business and my own workflows and be like, okay, I need to like sleep in a little bit later, so what do I need to shift in my life? So if you've got young children, if you obviously if you're on the road, all of those factors play into it. So like whatever you create today, it's also like it needs to support you today. You don't need to create something that's going to support you forever, and you can feel free to make changes whenever you need to.
Mhm.
Um, so in this workbook, which I would totally encourage you to go through on your own time, what I have here, this part 1 to assess your working style are really some reflective questions. And the point is to connect you back to your vision so that you're aligning your work to why you got started in the first place and what you're really working toward, because that will help you stay focused and it will help you know what to say yes to and what to say no to. Because if it doesn't move you towards your vision, then let it go. Because
Mm.
we can't do it all. Like, I mean, we like to believe that we can do it all, but we just can't do it all right now. Like over the course of time, we probably can,
Mhm.
but there's like a finite number of hours in the day. We have a finite amount of energy every day, so realistically, we just have to pick and choose sometimes. Um, and then the rest of these questions are really having to do with, um, like helping you also get really clear on what are your strengths as a practice owner? What are your struggles as a practice owner? What are the roles that you fulfill outside of your life? Just so that you're able to create a really clear picture of this is what my life looks like. This is my vision. These are my priorities. And then being honest about how many hours do you have per week on average to work on your practice outside of your clinical hours, right? Like,
Mhm.
okay, so say you see 20 clients a week. Well, beyond that, do you have 5 hours to do admin, and business type tasks? Do you have 10 hours? Because that's going to make a difference. And I know that I said I don't typically use the word productive. I do have one question in here that has the word productive, just because I haven't found a better word yet. Other than just saying like getting stuff done. So maybe that's what I need to just change it to, but we do also have times of day when we are able like to complete those tasks with more efficiency, right? And so again, it's just getting super, super real with ourselves of who we are and connecting with that. And then, identifying how much real time we have available. If you have an hour a week, okay, so then let's identify what needs to get done in that hour every week. If you've got 5 hours, okay, let's identify what needs to get done in that 5 hours, right? Or if
Mhm.
you find that the time you have isn't actually enough to help you meet your goals, then that comes into asking yourself, okay, well, is there something that I need to let go of so that I can create more space for myself over here? Um, and so that's
Right.
really all about like what the first part of this process is getting like a really clear background. And then here I've got like just some suggestions. Once you have that information, like identifying how many hours you have to work on the business of your practice every week. Going along with what's worked for some people. And here's 2 options that I've seen. So some people that I've worked with, they do best if they have an all-day admin day. Like they see
Mm.
clients maybe 3 or 4 days a week. They have 1 day a week that they only do admin. And maybe if they have extra time, they'll add in some self-care, things like that. And that really works for them because they have a much harder time switching between the clinical to the business side. And so they need that very defined separation.
Mm.
If you're more of a business owner who likes to pop around a lot, like you like to dabble in lots of things and you're ping ponging throughout the day because that's how your brain works best, then what I've typically found is that for those types of practice owners, it often works better for them to set aside maybe an hour or maybe 2 hours every day to do like little bits of work, because the sustained focus is more challenging for them. So those are typically the models that I've seen people choose, is usually like a little bit every day or one full admin day. And again, that's just going to be based on how you know that you work best.
Mm-hmm.
And then my suggestion is always going to be to, at some point, in some way, like block some of this time in your calendar so that, or if you say you're a simple practice user and you have clients who you allow self-scheduling requests, like make sure then once you've identified this, that you're not allowing your clients to like take over that time, right? Because it's super, super easy to say yes to clients, because either we want the revenue and we're like a little bit afraid, or, we've had to reschedule a few times, but if we don't protect that time, something else will always fill it.
Mm-hmm.
And
so
I don't know if
relate.
any of you have ever heard of the book, Eat the Frog, or I think that's what the title is. I read it quite a while ago. But there's this idea that like, a lot of times when we like eat the frog, we're doing the things that we least like first. Because usually what we end up doing is we end up pushing back the things that we don't like to the end. And then they just don't get done, or they get piled up, or we're kind of living in the state of dread, and one practice that I've really seen work well for a lot of business owners is to like do the thing that's hard, do the thing you don't like first, because that's going to energize you, because then you've got that thing already done. It's out of the way. Which means that then everything else that you have left are things that you mostly like doing, or maybe you feel neutral about. And so you're like feeling like just a little bit more motivated to then do the rest of those things. So those are my like general, like as you're kind of thinking through your workflow and what works for you, those are the steps that I typically recommend taking. So I'm just gonna pause again for a minute there and just see if there's any questions or any feedback.
Yeah, no questions. I was asking what their style is. What style do you identify with? Because when you're talking about it, like I'm definitely the ping pong style. Like I have to do a lot. Like I couldn't take a whole day and just do admin and then a whole day and just not work at all. I'm not like that. Like I always have to do something. It feels like productive, I don't know if we want to use that word, but for me, it's definitely like I'm here. And then, I do have my schedule blocked on Simple Practice and my calendar for other appointments for the afternoons to be totally open. So we can go, like we're in Yosemite right now. We're here for 2 weeks. So we always want to like block it and have that time so we can go explore wherever we are, like make the most out of where we are. And I am guilty for just like trying to slip somebody in there. And then it's like, we're supposed to leave at 1 and now we're leaving at 2 and that kind of thing. So I try to really stick to it, but it's hard. Yeah.
It is. It's hard to keep those boundaries. And that's true for all of us. That's why I actually love automated tools like schedulers. And I love, I will say hands down that like when I work with clinicians to like set up and optimize their Simple Practice account, hands down, the number one feature that people are most resistant to embracing is the self-scheduling request option.
Interesting.
But I feel like the beauty of that is that one, it's taking away a lot of that back and forth, the emails, the texts of like, does this work? No. Does this work? No. So, I mean, you're reducing a lot of just unnecessary communication, but also it helps you maintain your boundaries, because if it's not available to them, then they can't select that time.
Yeah.
And especially like you said, when you're on the road, like if you're a therapist who's traveling, you want to be able to explore and see the beautiful places. And if all you're doing is going to an Airbnb and seeing clients all day and you're not getting those experiences, then you're not living the fullness of like that traveling life, right? So you want to make sure that you're setting up, both your clinical and your admin schedule so that you can have all the time that you want.
Yes.
So
Yeah. I mean,
And
some traveling therapists I've talked to, they will take the whole day and they'll do like a 12-hour client day and then, have the rest of the week clear, or 2 12-hour days. And, like you were saying before, you really got to find your style, like really sitting down and assessing what's going to work best for you to be able to make the most out of these places. Because like you said, I
yeah,
mean, that's the worst, like sitting in an Airbnb, at a beautiful in Yosemite where we are right now, it's like a sin. It's like, I can't do it. Yeah.
totally. And that's also goes back a lot to knowing yourself. Like I've worked with therapists where they're like, I can't do more than 3 sessions back to back,
Right.
um,
Hmm.
without a break, or I can't, 6 is my absolute limit for the day, and so then for those therapists, what they've needed is they have to work over a couple of days. But I've also worked with therapists who can like, boom, 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 they can see 10 clients back to back, because
Yeah.
there's enough motivation and they have enough downtime around that to be like, it's okay. Like I can do this one long day because I know that I'm going to have these recovery days. But again, you have to just really know yourself and be honest about what really works for you.
Hmm.
Um, Another thing, going back to the question around like what's worked for other people. So I used to really recommend time blocking. And for a long time,
Mm.
that was like all the rage. Everyone is like, you should time block, you should time block. Then I became a mom. And and here's the thing, like my kid does not care about my time blocks. Like they're like, I don't really like, you were supposed to do that at 5 o'clock. I don't really care. And I realized that like time blocking works if you have a very consistent schedule that does not change much from day to day or week to week.
Mhm.
However, if you're a parent or if you are on the road and you're traveling and then you likely do not have a schedule that is that rigid or that set. And so actually the technique that I have seen create a lot of freedom for people recently who have more variable schedules is like the Pomodoro technique. I don't know if
Yes.
you're familiar with that or if you've
I've
utilized that.
I've heard of it. Isn't it like time, like a certain amount on, a certain amount off, like
Yeah.
that? I'm not exactly sure what the times are, but I think I've heard that before.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so, and it actually also works especially well, like for those people who identify as being, neurodivergent, that
Mm.
often is a great resource for them. But I find that almost everyone benefits from it. And so I will also I can drop a link, in the chat with like a Pomodoro online timer that I use.
Oh.
It's free. And so typically what you do is in this technique, you choose an amount of time, like anywhere from 5 minutes to 25 minutes is typically the max. You kind of have to start with your own focus capacity. And then
Mhm.
when you turn that timer on, you want to turn everything else off. Put your phone on focus mode, close your email, unless your task happens to be cleaning your inbox. But in general, close your email, like anything that would be like something that would distract you, turn it all off. And then for those 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, you're going to identify the one thing you're going to do. So say that you need to review your billing, right? Like which usually I recommend the therapist, you know, put the billing on automated billing, get those
Uh-huh.
clients on auto pay, and
Yeah.
then review it once a week. So for 15 minutes, you're going to look at your billing reports, right? In simple practice. Then when the timer goes off, you're going to take typically a 5-minute break, stop working, get up, go to the bathroom, grab a drink of water, come back, and then do another, 10, 15, 25-minute cycle, right?
Mhm.
And you will be amazed at how much you can get done in a very small amount of time when you are highly focused. I'm not a big believer in multitasking. Like, I don't actually think that that is very efficient or generally very helpful to us. I'm a big advocate of single tasking. And even if we're doing multiple single tasks in a row for like, variety's sake, I just find that we get things done faster. So that technique has been hugely beneficial. In my own business, like I actually took all my time blocks out of my calendar. And now what I do is on each day, like I'll put in like a Pomodoro task. Like I'll say, okay, I need to do 15 minutes of social media engagement, and then I'll set my Pomodoro timer, do that. And I just do it for me. Like, I don't necessarily have a set time that I do these things. I just do them. Like, it's just like, okay, on Monday, this is what I need to do at some point. Right. Like, and that flexibility works for me because my schedule varies a lot from day to day. So that's just a little trick that I have found a lot of people have benefited from. So if any of you have used the Pomodoro technique, I would love to hear that in the comments.
Yeah, nobody has said that they do, but Gabrielle said multitasking is not efficient at all. And I know her, so I know she tries, and I do too. But really it is a waste of time because you go over here and then it's like, oh God, what was I doing over here? And it is better if you do what you're saying, like close all the tabs down, which gives me anxiety to even X out my tabs because I feel like I'm working on all this stuff. But really shut them all down, like you're saying, and set this timer. I'd love to get the free, I guess you could Google like free Pomodoro timer.
Yeah. And I'll drop the link for you. It's free. I'll drop the link in the chat as soon as we're finished here. And then the other thing too is, I don't know, did you know that you can, if you use Chrome, you can group your Chrome tabs?
Somebody just told me that the other day. I don't remember who I was talking to.
Okay.
Oh, it was my business manager. She's like, you can group those together, right, Kym? And I was like, what?
Yeah, grouping your Chrome tabs also is super nice because then you can keep all the windows, all the tabs open, but you just like put them in a group and then you can just close the group.
Oh my God.
And then reopen.
I need you to do like a loom for the group.
Yeah, I'll have to do a little group tabs loom, because that actually was like a pretty big game changer for me too, because I usually keep a lot of windows open, or like sometimes if my husband happens to grab my phone and he's like, you have like 96 windows open on your phone. I was like, because I need it.
I know everything is.
Yeah. So I totally get that.
Gabrielle saying, no, I need my tabs in like all caps. So yes. Yeah, I get it. Oh my gosh.
And so then, heading back to this workflow, once you've really kind of gotten clear on how you work best, then you've got to pick the tools that support you. And here's the thing, I usually always recommend starting with a tool that's either already integrated to what you're using or that is free. Like you can pay for things, but like, you don't need to. Like, start with what's the most accessible. And then if you find that it's not working for you, or you find that you just love it and you want the paid features, you can upgrade. But like, and so I've got a few recommended tools here that I have found. Like, I recommend them because they are either low or no cost. And I find them to have a very low learning curve for most people. Okay. And they drop into 3 categories. I mean, you can get a tool to do just about anything, right? I mean, you really can. But for the day-to-day management of your practice, I think the 3 most important tools are a calendar that works for you, like an EHR, EMR, and it's something to manage your tasks. Those 3 things I consider like foundational to a sustainable business. Personally, I mean, most of the clients I work with use Google Workspace. Personally, for calendar, I usually recommend a Google Calendar. It's just the most feasible. It's easy to share. It's easy to invite people to. It's already linked up with the rest of your workspace. In my personal life, like my husband and I share an iCal, but one of the things that's super frustrating is like my Google Calendar will push to my iCal, but my iCal won't push back to my Google Calendar.
Oh,
and so then but he doesn't want to use a Google Calendar. So I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to work with you because this is what works for us, but it would be a whole lot easier if we just use Google Calendar for everything.
Yeah.
and I do work with a lot of people who still say that they love their paper calendar. And don't get me wrong, I do keep a paper calendar on my fridge for like
Mhm.
quick visuals, of just like, okay, we have dance class, we have, this event and whatnot coming up. But the more digital that you can become, especially when you're on the road, one thing is it's going to be less things that you have to try to keep track of. And it's just going to make your life easier because you're going to be able to access it everywhere.
Mhm.
But I
Absolutely.
will say that like I have a client who uses Simple Practice and she loves having paper. So like for her, like I'm her practice manager. And so I will go in and print off a PDF, like I'll create a PDF for her of her calendar in Simple Practice every
Nice.
week so that she can print it off because that's what works for her, so you do have to kind of find it, but digital is easier.
Mhm.
And then
Absolutely.
and I definitely work with a lot of clinicians who still do a lot of things manually. Personally, I'm a big advocate of Simple Practice. Kym, I know you use Simple Practice.
Mhm.
Um,
Yep.
it's not perfect because none of them are, but I do find that it's the most robust, it's the most customizable, and they are continually investing in making it better.
Mhm.
And so those are the three things that when I'm looking at a tool, like if they're not making any updates or improvements, then in my mind, I'm like, are they going to keep this around or am I going to have to like find something else?
Yeah. That's so
Right.
true.
And then probably the one that I feel like the most therapists I work with who really like the tool they're using is probably Therapy Notes, is probably the second most common that I think is pretty easy, not quite as robust. You can't do quite the customizations, especially around like intake forms. You have a lot more limitations.
Mhm.
But it's a good system, and then obviously you can do a manual system, and a lot of that also maybe depends, like if you're self-pay versus insurance, that's going to make a difference. If you have a very small client load versus a large client load, then that makes a difference. But I will say that whatever you use all the features. So like, for example, I worked with a number of clients where when we started working together, even though they had Simple Practice, they would still bill using a separate app, like maybe something like Ivy
Oh,
Pay,
right. Yeah, right.
which I
Which
get it
doesn't
because Ivy
help because then
Pay,
you have
yeah,
to manually update the payments and
exactly. And so it creates a
right,
lot of room for error. It creates essentially double work. Um,
right. They
it,
think they're
it's
saving
kind of
money, but yeah.
Exactly.
Mhm.
It's kind of a nightmare for record keeping. And so, yes, I understand the appeal of Ivy Pay because the credit card fees are a little bit lower and that's really appealing to people. But on the same
Mhm.
time, the amount of extra work you're doing is probably costing you more than that small difference in your credit card fees. So, especially
Exactly.
while you are on the road traveling, the more you can use the features available to you to automate things in your practice that can be automated, the easier it's going to be. Like say you're sitting in an airport and you are emailing with a new client that wants to schedule. Well, if you're using something like Simple Practice, all you got to do is put in their name, put in their email, click, 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 send all their intake forms, boom, you're good.
Mhm.
And you can do that during a layover.
Yeah.
And you can do that from your phone. you
Yeah.
know, so So that's going to help just make it easier for you because you're not having to do everything manually. It's also a whole lot easier to update. Like if you're sending PDFs and then something changes, then you've got to update the PDF, then you've got to, go through all these steps. Whereas, again, if you're using a tool like Simple Practice or Therapy Notes, and you need to make an update, you just log in, go to your consent form, click edit, make your changes, boom, you're done.
Mhm.
So, um,
Exactly.
yeah. And then the third category is going to be you need a way to manage your work, right? Like you need some kind of, even if you're not a to-do list lover, we can't keep everything in our brains. Like it's just not possible, and that's like a recurring thing with like my husband and I'm like, I'm very to-do list oriented and he is not. And so he'll be like, oh, I forgot to do this. And I'm like, what would help you remember? I'm like, probably if you wrote it down.
That's how my boyfriend is. He's like, if you would literally just write this stuff down, you wouldn't be like going crazy in your mind trying to remember everything you have to do. I'm like, yeah, I
'Cause that's the
know. I
thing.
really need to do that. Yeah.
Because it frees it up, like it frees
Mhm.
up your mind space. So then you don't even have to think about it anymore because it's all there, especially
Yes.
for recurring things, for things that you're doing, like in my own business, once a month, I invoice my clients. Once a month, I track my key performance indicators to get my metrics. I look at my reports. So I just create all those as like a recurring thing. So it just pops up on my calendar automatically. So once I put it in, I never have to think about it again until it comes up, and then I just do it. And as far as task management, I mean, there's so many different tools that you can choose from. Personally, if you're a Google Workspace user, I love Google Tasks because they show up on your calendar. You can
Nice.
add in little notes. You can check them when you're done. I think it's, as far as like free, easy, accessible, it's super easy to just like add it on your phone. I love it. That's actually what I use that a lot in my own business. The other two that I found a lot of people have had the easiest time using is Todoist, which also will integrate with your Gmail account, so you can like add
Hmm.
tasks from Gmail. And that's really good if you're a checklist person. I think Todoist is super great for like the people who love a list. Now, if you're a visual person and you love sticky notes and boards and you like having that, then I think Trello is a great option for you because
Mhm.
you can lay it all out in a way that's visually appealing, however it makes sense to your brain.
Mhm.
But in order to be more efficient, like you do have to have a way to get the things out of your head and manage your tasks again for the purpose of making sure you're reaching your goals.
Yes. We do have a couple of questions.
Yeah, let's hear
Mary
'em.
Mary Ellen wants to know, have you worked with Sessions Health EHR yet?
I have not. I'm not, and
Yeah.
I'm not particularly familiar with that one.
Mm-mm. Yeah. I mean, I think that's a newer one, right? Right, Mary
Mhm.
Ellen? I have heard people going to that one though. And then she says, how about integrating using systems like Headway or Alma along with your EHR billing? Any hints for that? I
Um,
actually have a video for that, Mary Ellen. I
I
could
was gonna
drop it
say,
too.
I feel like Kim's got some really good resources that I would check out for that. It really is gonna depend on
Mhm.
um like the EHR that you use. But I mean, to
Yeah.
my knowledge, none of them integrate, like there's no integrations that exist between them. Like they
Hmm.
don't talk to each other. Um, which is also, I mean, part of just the reality of like EHRs is because they're all HIPAA compliant, like it's not like some of the other online tools that exist that are going to have those kind of native integrations and partnerships.
Hmm.
Um, so I really think that a lot of that is going to be just making sure that you've got a good routine for yourself, so that, if you're wanting to keep your records accurate, like inside your EHR, that you have a routine for regularly kind of importing that data from your Alma or your Headway.
Hmm.
But yeah, Kim's a great resource for that. Those are also things that if you get to a point where you want to hire some virtual support for your practice, those are things that are really great tasks for a virtual support person to do. Because they can go in and just do that for you regularly. But one thing to keep in mind is that, like Simple Practice in particular, they prepare these great tax reports for you, like that gives you a really good snapshot, and they have a lot of good reporting features that are helpful for accounting, for bookkeeping, for those sorts of things. But if that's only helpful to you if the information in there is actually accurate. So if you're not actually putting your correct session fees, if you're not actually updating it, then those reports are kind of useless. Um, but yeah, Kim, I don't know if you have specific resources you could
I
maybe.
do. Mary Ellen, feel free to reach out to me too, PM me, and I do have a YouTube video. I'll drop it in here too about a way to manage it, but it's with Simple Practice, the way I did it. But just side note, a lot of people will just make the client self-pay in their EHR. And then, if Headway pays you $125 for a session, you just make it a self-pay. And then when they pay you, you go in and just reconcile like once a month, or like Vanessa
Mhm.
saying, like figure out what your system is. And Mary Ellen's saying the good routine part is where I get lost. That's
Mhm.
the hard thing for her, which I totally get. It's hard to find a good routine. But I like
I
what
do.
Vanessa's saying about, identify your style and then use the Pomodoro method or try to figure out a method that's going to work for you that you can get the stuff done. Because particularly with Headway and Alma, you've got to reconcile that or it's not going to be okay in the client account. I have seen people that just make it zero, like the payment is zero for the client and they don't even worry about it. They just keep the notes and everything in their EHR and they just leave it like that. So that's another way to do
I
it.
mean,
But
and you have
finding
to
the
do
way,
it with what you feel comfortable with,
right.
because like I'm the type of person where like people don't balance their checkbooks anymore, but like I like always know to the penny what's in my bank account. Like I'm just very particular like that. And some people just don't have the need to be as precise, but just remember that like this is your money,
Mhm.
and as a business owner, you are responsible to the IRS for reporting accurately like how much money you are making. And you want to make sure that you're getting paid. Like, so there is, that if sometimes billing feels overwhelming, well, if you've got outstanding insurance payments or you've got Alma and Headway, there's been some kind of disconnect and you're not getting your payments to your bank account or something like that, that means you're working for free. And I don't think any of us want to do that, so sometimes, part of that is just that mindset of like, okay, I don't like doing the billing. It's very frustrating and I don't want to pay someone, but I like getting paid. I like making money.
Exactly.
But and EAPs can also be the same way. I've seen a lot of people do put them in a self-pay depending on like the EAP too. So that's a great suggestion, Kym. So then this last section here is really identifying what those tasks are that you need to do to keep your practice sustainable. And now I will say that I've identified 7 essential tasks that I think all practice owners need to do to remain sustainable. And you can click here on this PDF to access like those essential tasks. I've got another document there that you can grab for free.
Nice.
But at the end of the day, you have to own your calendar. Like your clients don't dictate your schedule, like you dictate your schedule, right? So you've got to take ownership of your calendar so that your calendar is not owning you. You've got to engage with your inbox, like you can't just put it off to the side and not do anything. You don't need to be inbox zero. You do you when it comes to your inbox, but you've got to be in there every day. You've got to at least do something, right? You have to bill your clients. Cause again, I've worked with a number of therapists and we come in and we're like, well, I haven't submitted any of these claims in like 2 months. I'm like, so you've been seeing clients for free for 2 months. I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
Let's start
the
by
biller
billing
in me
your
is like
clients.
screaming, like, no, don't do that.
Because because if you don't have cash flow coming in,
right.
then that's not sustainable and that's going to create stress. Like you need to have a regular cash flow coming in. You've got to complete your notes, like that's part of it. And Kym has a super great video if you're a simple practice user on how to create notes in 2 minutes. And then she's also got the new training on utilizing AI, so again, there are ways that you can utilize tools that exist to make those things much simpler and easier and more automated for you. But it has to be done, right? You've got to reconcile your accounts. And again, like one thing to keep in mind, if you're doing your own bookkeeping and accounting, is that if you're using an EHR, there's 2 steps. Like first you have to reconcile like your client payments, like are all of your sessions paid for? Did you receive all your insurance payments? Then you have to reconcile that to your bank. Did all that money actually go to your bank account, right? So it is a 2-part process. Obviously you've got to maintain your credentials. So making sure you're getting your CEUs in, making sure you're submitting your paperwork on time, because obviously that lapse would significantly impact your practice, especially if you are in multi-states, and you're traveling. There's some maintenance there that, you've got to make sure, like, am I still allowed to deliver this telehealth session in this state? Am I getting in everything for all of the states that I'm licensed in? So that's got to be a priority. And then you need to track some metrics, because honestly, I know that a lot of us, we can shy away and be like, I'm not a numbers person. I'm like a people person. And I get it, because I didn't used to think I was a numbers person either until I realized that really numbers are just a narrative. Like, they're the narrative of what's happening in your business. So the more that you can be comfortable with, like, okay, what is my revenue? Okay, how many referrals am I getting each month? And how many of those are actually converting into clients? And in my Facebook group, next week, I actually have a live that I'm talking all about how to start tracking your metrics. And I'm providing you with a super simple dashboard in a Google Sheet that you can use to start tracking your metrics. So those things are pretty essential for all practices. Now, if you're in growth mode, if you're, doing some other, you're a multi-revenue practice, like, there's going to be some other tasks that might be more essential for you, like marketing, paying your team, creating new offers, building and nurturing relationships, so some of those things are going to be custom to your practice. And then I know we're kind of coming up on our hour. And then one thing that I'll suggest that's also super important when you're identifying your tasks is this idea of creating a baseline, right? So, like, sometimes we have crisis in our life. We have a family member that's sick that we need to care for. We come down with a sickness, and, or, just something catastrophic happens that is an acute crisis, not a long-term shift in our life, right? And so when that happens, we need to quickly know, what's the bare minimum? Like, what are the bare minimum things I need to do to sustain my practice, right? And identifying those things. So, like, it's going to be seeing clients, it's going to be getting paid, it's going to be paying your bills, right? Like,
Right.
those are it's going to be just checking your inbox, like, and everything else while you're in the midst of that crisis can probably wait. You'll probably be okay. But if we don't have that quick go-to of, like, okay, I'm in a crisis, here are the 3 things that are my priorities, everything else can wait, then a lot of times we just let everything go. And then it's just a really hard hole to dig out of. And it just makes the crisis that much worse. However, now, if something is an acute crisis that becomes just a long-term part of our life, like maybe the illness isn't going to go away, or maybe our short-term childcare issue becomes our kid is home with us now every day, then that means we need to just revisit our workflow altogether and establish new flows.
Or if you move to a new Airbnb every 2 weeks, like I do. You have to have random travel days that you have to put into your schedule. Yeah.
Exactly. So that, like I said, that workbook is downloadable for you to work through on your own time. I'm happy to work with anyone one-on-one. I'll drop some links in this video once we're finished.
I just dropped all your links there. So they're there.
Awesome.
If you guys
Thank you.
need them. Yeah, want them.
Because at the end of the day, like, yes, being a practice owner can have some headaches. It can be hard. It is work. Okay. It's not going to ever not be some kind of work, but the work that you're doing can be done in a way that's sustainable, and it can be done in a way that feels good to you and does not leave you feeling overwhelmed and burdened all the time.
Yes. And I just want to say, Mary Ellen said a couple of times how helpful this has been, and she wished it was interactive so you could see how much she's nodding at what you're saying. Yes, thanks for saying that, Mary Ellen. I'm glad it helped you. So you guys, this is what the membership, the traveling therapist membership, is all about, and it will be more interactive because you'll be in the Zoom room with us instead of just hanging out watching on Facebook Live. So as I said at the beginning, this is what I'm creating in the traveling therapist membership. Trainings like this to help you stay organized, and sound healings, and the photography class we had yesterday. There's going to be all kinds of just content that's going to help you so much thrive as a traveling therapist. So anyway, I dropped the links. Go join the membership, please. It's $17.99 a month. That's less than $1 a day. It's like 50 cents a day. So I think it's super affordable. Love to see you guys inside. I also dropped the bingo board. So anybody that completes the bingo board this week will win prizes. So somebody is going to get an entry into the course and the membership. I'm giving away 2 prizes. Let me make this more of a gallery view. Yeah, so I'm excited, you guys. I want you to come join us. I hope you loved Vanessa's presentation. All her links are here. Let us know what you think. If you watch this later and you have questions, Vanessa's in the group too, so she'll come and answer them for you. Okay, do you want to say anything else, Vanessa?
No, just thank you so much for having me. It was really fun to be
you're
here
welcome.
today. And I hope that all of you are able to enjoy your travels and, find a way to work and travel in a way that works for you.
Yes, me too. Thank you. Thanks everybody who came today, and we'll see you later.
All right.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye. Bye, Vanessa. Bye, guys.